G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a brilliant weekend. Now firstly, I just want to thank you all for your lovely comments and messages yesterday and those that did reach out to me. Sadly, I'll never be able to get to every comment or every message, but I just want to say thank you very much. And I do screenshot some of them just to save in a folder for if I'm ever having a bad day. I really, really do appreciate all the support. And look, we are going to keep making videos and I'm going to sail this ship with a hole in it until we bloody sink. So look, today, as always, we do have a lot to go over. We need to look at the maps and I want to clear up a common misconception about territorial advances and the speed of these, because people go, well, that's going to take this long. They don't understand how attritional war works. And then we need to talk about Russian conscription. But where we're going to start is Russia having a little bit of an oopsie and a bit of an embarrassment now that a S-70 has had to be shot down by one of their own planes and has then crash landed in Ukrainian territory. Now, this is actually a drone that you and I have spoke about at length earlier this year, as I was receiving reports off the ground that fit the description of this specific system. So let's then talk about that. So here we go. So about 6 months ago, I actually think it was maybe 6.5, I released a couple of videos here. Now, what this was talking about was we had seen a large increase in Russia's ability to strike targets behind the line. Not only the ability to strike them, but have really good observation on those targets as they were being hit. Now, there could have been a few reasons for this, but what I was hearing, what I was being told is there was a new drone maybe in play. Now, I'm not saying that this was that. I'm not saying we predicted the future, but now we can confirm it's in play. But I just want to bring up that we did talk about this. We did see an increase in the kill chain. Some of that we can put down to iScanner becoming under then the artillery units. But as far as the observation drones in the air, still not super clear on this. Potentially, this is what it is. And this tells us a little bit about this system now that we know it's in play. And we're going to give both the good and bad for the system for both Ukraine and Russia. Now, at the time, the conclusion that we came to was possibly it's in the air, but Russia may be holding back a very rare, very expensive advanced system like this for either testing in occupied territory or in Russian territory, because they don't want to lose their technology and it fall into Ukrainians' hands, and then it's going to fall into the US hands. As we do know, there will be some guys with bags of money rocking up being like, can we have that, can we have that, can we have that? And Lockheed Skunk Works are probably going to have it on a table by this afternoon. But we did at least speak about that this could be in play. But this is significant for a couple of reasons. We're going to go over those reasons once we have a look at the footage here. So in the front here, this is the S-70. We believe this is a Su-57, then chasing it here. And what you'll see is then a air-to-air missile be fired. You'll see it come then out to the right and engage. There we go. Then the S-70 here. So the Su-57, as we believe, now has its first air-to-air kill. Air-to-air kills are very, very rare these days, but this is a friendly air-to-air kill. If I was a pilot, I'd still be claiming it. I'll be putting a little S-70 sticker on the side of my plane. So we see that footage, and then we'll go over, we can have a look at then the crash site here. Clearly, this is an S-70. You can see like that flying wing design. Now, where this came down is very interesting and very important as well for who's going to get whatever technology, hardware, software could potentially be in this. So we can see then this falling down here. Now, this is an unmanned system for those who don't know, so there hasn't been a pilot die due to this, and then it has fallen down in the vicinity of Konstantinivka. Now, where we have a look, of course, this is Ukraine, we see where then Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar is, and then Konstantinivka, so behind the line within Ukrainian territory. That is a significant event also. Now, one thing we see as well is the burning on the ground. Sorry, looks like this guy's taken a wee on the fire, not doing a great amount. Again, all this footage will be on the Telegram if you want to watch it. But one thing we have seen with these is these are bloody massive. So unless this guy is 3'11", this thing is very, very large. And as far as the complete specs, we don't really know. And you can see it here, flies in tandem with the Su-57. This guy on the ground has confirmed this as well. He arrived at the crash site. Stealth drone, only 2 examples were built. I actually believe it's 4. I could be incorrect. The dimensions of the gear and the jet engine are enormous. More footage soon. We'll also look at what fighter bomber has said about this incident. But this presents a few significant events. Firstly, that Russia is using and has both Su-57 and S-70 operating over Ukraine. Not just occupied parts of Ukraine, but over Ukraine itself. And what we're seeing is, well, these are flying and being filmed without being harassed by air defense. So this gives us 2 more conclusions here, but these are not mutually exclusive. So either the S-70 and the Su-57 are more stealthy than people would like to admit because they're not being harassed, or Ukraine's air defense is severely limited. As I said, these are not mutually exclusive. It's probably a bit of column A and a bit of column B. One of the other clear indicators that Ukraine's air defense is limited is we see the Orions, the drones, which should be an absolute cakewalk for any air defense, causing havoc in areas like Kursk and other areas as well. So the AD should be just taking those down, but it is very limited. That's where we get that presumption. But as far as the stealth capability, well, again, it does show that this isn't being harassed. Now, another observation we can pull out of this is that these are operating over an active war zone, contested airspace. So this means that they are either in service or in very late stage testing. You don't put early stage, mid stage testing platforms into a theatre that could potentially be taken down, especially high-end systems. We're going to talk over more of that learning as well. But the second predictable observation we can make out of this is that for Russia, the loss of a very advanced system like this could very, very easily lead to classified technology leaks, both hardware and software. And I'm positive that there will be guys with bags full of money rocking up and that this will be on a table in somewhere in the US within the bloody day. Skunkworks, all these others, they'll be very, very interested in this. Again, we don't know the level of technology. We see guys on Twitter taking photos going, oh, this is shit. Okay, whatever, but are you an aeronautical engineer? No, well, you might not have much to actually speak on this other than if everything with a Russian flag on it is shit, that's probably where their opinion starts and ends. But one other thing, which I think very easily could have happened with this as well, is we have seen that there was complete sort of loss of control, maybe communications with this. Of course, it's flying into Ukrainian territory. Now, the Su-57, the pilot there, I'm guessing that they have a way to zero the computers on board the S-70. For those who are unaware, with anything like a drone or some military computers, there is typically a Z button, like a zero all. You press that and it just deletes everything within the radio. So it's basically just a brick and the hardware. But one thing I do speculate, well, if this has lost communications and it's going off like this, maybe the pilot was unable to zero the computers, and a lot of that can probably be pulled out even though it has been hit by a missile. So what do these do? Well, these basically fly in tandem with Russia's newest stealth fighter, the Su-57, to act as a force multiplier. We've been developing very similar. We call ours the Wingman. And as development of planes has led to stealth, there is a couple of drawbacks with stealth fighters. They typically have a lot less range and less armament, both in fuel and bombs. So what these drones can do is they can work in tandem with these planes. They can supply extra fuel. They can supply extra hard points for weapons as well as autonomously they can conduct their own missions. At least that is what the claim is and what is trying to be developed all around the world. But what I do wonder in this, looking at this war, is that quantity has a quality of its own. What planes have made the biggest difference is definitely the Su-34. This is a 90s design, twin-engine, long-range powerhouse built to just drop bombs en masse, which it has been doing with those fabs. Now, the Western states have almost exclusively moved to the single-engine, short-range stealth F-35. And I do wonder if engineers around the world are thinking, okay, that's great, but we do need a cheap bomb Uber, like we see the chaos that the Su-34 has had as well. Let's look at what then Fighter Bomber says specifically about this. Well, yes, you bastards, this news should read like this. Russia has begun massively use heavy strike UAVs, the Octohetic, which is the S-70, in then the military operation. At the moment, not a single hit of these UAVs by the means of Ukrainian air defence has been recorded. So speaking, could be degraded air defence, could be more stealth, or a mixture of the two, likely mixture of the two. There is plenty of objective control from these UAVs on the internet. Most of the OK is contributed to means of other destruction. So that these are destroying things that are attributed to then other weapons systems as well. They basically fucked up a serial one. This is indicated by the colouring. Only standard UAVs are painted like this. So trying to soften the blow. At the same time, it's difficult to understand what happened to the UAV because it fell in territory controlled by the Ukrainians. That is, they will disassemble it down to the last screw and, of course, familiarise themselves with its rich internal contents. Secondly, in fact, both the S-70 and the escort fighter were flying over enemy territory at high altitude, shot through and accessible to all air defence systems, including man-pads, like we spoke about in the beginning. We could have fucked up only the S-70, but the Su-57, this is a completely different scenario. I understand the loss of a pair of the A-50s did not entail any serious organisational conclusions, but we would definitely bounce back here, and it would be more difficult. So this is something's failed, and it is a large loss as well. Now, I want to speak on stealth just for a minute. That I was reading a military report recently that some analysts actually believe that stealth is sort of a 90s to 2000s, 2010s, 2020s sort of fad, that the stealth advanced well beyond radar through these years, but the radar is catching it very quickly, and that radar will catch up, overtake, and the reduced speed, maneuverability, and cost of stealth will actually make it obsolete and will go back to increased speed, increased maneuverability, and range that non-stealth fighters have. So that could be an interesting swing we see over the next coming years. This incident actually does remind me of when the F-117 Wobblin' Goblin American stealth fighter was shot down by an air defense system as well. Now, there are some interesting bits in this because America, well, then they bombed a Chinese embassy. Now, official reasons for this, it's a little bit shady, but they did believe that Serbia had given the Chinese embassy some of the F-117 parts not to fall into then ability to re-engineer this. It's widely assumed China did get a hold of the plane to study its technology. There's also been speculated China was using that air campaign to test its technology and track stealth bombers. The situation actually reminds me a little bit of that. I guarantee these parts are on their way somewhere. But war is a test bed for so many systems, both Western, Russian, and the longer this goes on, I think more and more it'll be a test bed for Chinese systems as well. And I got sent this message the other day that I wanted to share with you. I think this is very interesting, and I think this now fits in a good time to then share this. He talks about this table I made, and he gives a different table to show the changes in the occupied territory as Russia is advancing along here. But the theory I have about Western support for Ukraine from an economic view. My thinking is that the West have realised their air defence industry is no longer fit for purpose, having spent the last 25 years supporting an asymmetric style of war, and they are woefully unprepared for any kind of protracted near-peer conflict. They're using the war as an opportunity to transform their defence industry to respond to the adaptation of emergent technologies and tactics, like providing material support in small quantity to see if it works, what doesn't, and how they counter to inform future development while limiting exposure to technologies to adversaries. So none of the high-end stuff that maybe Russia China could get, but okay, small quantity, this works, that doesn't, and go from there. We know massive amount of testing phase here. I'm thinking mainly in terms of the US and the Lend-Lease program. We know that the USSR had World War II debts through the program, and I think the final payments were made by Russia post-Soviet collapse. Now, I've written about this, which this is true and sort of different as well. In the 1990s, had the final settlement. Just before the Soviet Union dissolved, the US and USSR renegotiated the final sum of $674 million, of which $470 million remained to be paid by the end of 2002. Russia continued making small payments in the 90s. By 2006, it made its last payment, effectively ending the Lend-Lease program. Although the amount Russia paid was much lower than the original value of the Lend-Lease supplies, it was considered a partial repayment with much of the remaining debt forgiven over time. And you'll often hear a lot of Russian bloggers or Russian officials saying things like, well, you paid with money, but we paid with men for, of course, the victory in World War II. But we'll continue. I might be a bit cynical, But I see the US using this as an opportunity to have Ukraine subsidise all of these new ammunition factories that are being built in the US and paying for R&D in the longer term. Essentially, the West is stimulating their own economies, creating jobs and transforming their defence industries under the guise of providing aid and being good global citizens, while it is really more about acting out of complete self-interest. Keen to know your thoughts. Very interesting way to look at it too. We do know there is a lot in this to gain from a war. We know technology advances very quickly and you get an idea of what works and what doesn't without using any of your own soldiers. But of course that comes with drawbacks that some of that technology then could fall into hands you don't want it to. But as far as using this to simulate economies, yeah, absolutely. There is a degree of this. Nothing is better than a war. This is why people say war is a racket. Using it to subsidise this, I do believe the US know that not a real cent of this is ever going to actually come back. It's going to be forgiven in other ways. It will be where we want grain, we want control over this and that. But as far as cash coming back, the GDP of Ukraine is not going to be able to pay that back, at least for a very, very long time without just plunging further into debt. But very interesting, and I do appreciate sending it across. Now, this is something that I see a lot. We need to speak on this just quickly. In 1 year, Russia took 0.1% of Ukrainian territory. At this pace, it would take Russia roughly 800 years and 2.4 billion more soldiers to take the rest of Ukraine. But even this small advancement could have been stopped had the West sent more aid. Now, this is something I see, this sort of idea narrative all the time, and it's just misleading completely. Firstly, attritional war is not linear. Given the numbers that we have shown you in the graph one slide back, we can see that it is not linear. Not only is it advancing, it's advancing more quickly. Attritional war is like bankruptcy, little by little and then all at once. It doesn't work like that. The month-by-month numbers prove this as well. So this is not a way to then look at this. But even if you take the pace of October, that it would be complete Donetsk occupation in, I think it was 8 or 9 months, which is very significant. But of course, it's not linear. It doesn't do this. Things tend to do that or do that. We will see, at least chip away, chip away. That's how attritional war bloody works. So let's have a look at the maps. Of course, here we have Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Now, we've missed a couple of days here, so we will go back and forward just a little bit. Let's go down into the Pokrovsk, Ukrainsk, then Kursk front in here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to swing back to yesterday. We're going to click this on, and what you can see is out to the northeast of Hrenik, we can see that Russia did make some significant amount of ground in here. Of course, attritional war, significant ground, 3Ks, that is a lot. And as well, some ground just out from Hirovkia as well. Then we skip forward one, then to today. We don't see much real change around here except for some movement just to Masamilanivkia. This is down in this Hirovka area, as well as more near to Shkerne and out to where this train line is. That Suryk has been showing for a couple of, maybe a week now, that Russia is up to that train line. Here is our folder. Let's look at what changes. So let's talk about this Hostre front down in here. Now, Noel Reports has an update just here for us, and this does show very different to some of the other then Ukrainian maps. So what you can see, this is Persha and then drew through here, that this whole area in here has come under Russian control, Russian occupation. That Suryk has been showing under control for a while. Now, let's have a further look at some of these other areas down in Hostre, which we see by then the Suryk map. He's showing more closing in exactly where Noel Reports showed yesterday, in and around where this grey zone part is here, as well as some movement down just to the south in here, which yesterday's map did show us as well. But the main thing he's showing that is out to Ostrivsky has come under occupation, of course, now a blocking force through the Vovcha River as well. So let's move up just a little bit further, and then we see where Ukrainsk is in here too. So this is where this is showing fairly different. This is Ukrainsk, this is Tshkerne, sits right in here. So it's not showing this movement out to the north to the train line that this one is showing, but of course more of a push into Tshkerne, which we know is definitely occurring by maps and geologs too. What this is showing differently though by Suryk is of course much further movement up to the train line. Of course, a movement to the north of Seledove on the flanks too, but also that they've captured the majority of Tushkerne as well, crossing now the train line too. So Syriac is showing significantly more control in and around that area. Again, this is an area to keep an eye on. We do know the flanks are very vulnerable. Syriac is saying that this road here, there's control as well. All the maps are showing then southerly flank control. We'll see how this looks for Seladove in the future too. Now, one thing we're hearing more and more is around Robotne, Zap front, that there will be some level of further Russian assault. So I think Noel shared this, that saying that could be something down here. And we do see that Ukrainian officials are saying that the enemy has amassed personnel down here, and there could be some maneuver in Zaporizhia, particularly the new Russian-occupied village of Prytny, located on the border, and could be used with small infantry groups for assaults, like we've seen Russia do a bit of a step away from those large armoured assaults into smaller infantry assault groups, and then bringing up larger amounts of forces from guys on motorbikes or ATVs, UTVs from there, and sort of using that as a hinge as that has developed in that tactic. And he's talking about Prytny here, but others are saying around Zap that there could be some level of assault in here, which would be definitely a stretch on the front line. Seems there's a lot of forces up in Kursk at the moment. So while we're down here, let's have a look and around Vuhledar, where we know came under control over the past week as well. On the fourth around Vuhledar was that Russia had then moved out to the north as well further, and then Syriac is showing this today. So we go on then Vuhledar map. He's showing that there is a further push then beyond Vuhledar as well, with this westerly push out of Vodiane, that likely this will then push out even further and create further buffer zone around Vuhledar itself. So very interesting movements that once that has collapsed, we will see what happens then further, if it's able to speed up, or that Russia has really expended a lot of energy down here and it will then slow down. We will wait and then see. We thought it would have been like that with Avdiivka, but we have seen that constant fall and collapse rearwards since Avdiivka also. So we're just going to turn this on. We're going to have a look up in the maps. Of course, this is yesterday. We're just going to see where is red as we then move up. Now, this is where there are significant changes in around the Peshcherny and Rivkia front. We have spoken about where Syriac shows significant differences in here, and how this sort of whole area from Peshcherny down to Avdiivka could really close up, and how Russia is trying to get to the Oskil here and then create a north and a south group, what would create a big problem in areas like Kupiansk, and then furthermore down into areas like Borova, really creating this separation. Now that the bridges are really coming down too in areas, it's going to have a logistical bloody problem, and that Russia is pushing forward in this direction, pushing forward on many different fronts. This is what you do in protracted attritional warfare, or as I tried to say, patritional warfare, that you push on many different fronts. And if the Russians push down in Zap, like we are hearing, that creates a problem hundreds of kilometers away from other areas, stretching further and further and further. The numerical superior force has this advantage that they can do this. This is why the Kursk operation, I still question from day one. I still question, I think I'll question well into the future. So let's look at what then Noel reports says around then Peshcherny. Now he's showing more of this then southerly push out of here, but not to the degree of either of these other maps. And then we see the first update here of Syriac. This is Peshcherny, this red dot here, a further push out to the west here as well. Out on top, if we have a look, this red dot, this is this Hlashkivka, so more closing in on that territory and more out to the north too. And then we get his second update that's showing, let's zoom in, see where this road bends. This is Hlashkivka, this is Kolesnivka, that this is closing up right around in here, and that the Russian forces are pushing closer and closer to the Oskil. By Deep State's map, say around 2 kilometers already. So definitely pushing in here. These updates down around in Andriivka, I don't believe these are new. I believe this is somewhat catching up on updates we had seen about a week ago in this front, and some of these areas I still believe are then slightly behind. So that is, though, significant up in here of that being shown, and we'll see more and more movements over the coming weeks and days also. So then we jump to, today, up in here, there is another change as well, out Berestove and Andriivka. So I sort of misled you here. So we see from the 4th to the 5th to the 6th as well, more changes in here. And that is definitely an area to keep your eye on. Now, we're just going to come down New York, Toretsk front. Little movement in here, but again, urban fighting, little movement can be more significant than 3 kilometers somewhere else as well. We don't have a map update in here, but where we will come is Seversk front. We know this area has been holding very, very stagnant for years now, but recently has started to move. So let's look at then the Seversk Spernay front. So what we're looking is control of the northwestern hills of Spernay. So this is Spernay in here. So this area just in here that Surak is saying that the Russian forces were able to take over some of that high ground. Now let's zoom out. Let's jump up into then Kursk, and what we see, Glushkovo, Vasyoli, Obakivka front here, where the Russians had pushed in. I don't know why this never showed as blue on the deep state map here. Like I've said, they've not really been tracking this front very well compared to, say, like Noel reports, but Surak is saying at Glushkovo district, Russian army recaptured a series of Vasyoli and most of Obakivka. In addition, Ukrainian army were expelled from the farms of Medvedi. So we see around this area here that it's saying that Russia had then retaken many of these areas, and out off the corner here as well. I don't think we're going to get the location here. No, we won't. But just around this area here, that the farms had come back under Russian control of that push, that offensive by Ukraine back into Kursk as well. So that is all the maps we have. I found that in the last couple of days, there are significant changes, and I think at the pace at the moment that we could see October be a larger month than even September, and September was the largest month in 2.5 years, and that goes against that. It's going to take 800 years and 2.8 billion, and it's not how attritional warfare works at all. That eventually it may speed up a lot faster one way or the other way. Currently, it's looking like the Russians will continue to speed up, and we will look at manpower shortages in another video. Now, this I found very interesting as well. Putin and what army? Why Russia keeps putting off mobilization. Now, some of this is from this CIT, the Conflict Intelligence Team on Twitter as well here, if you wanted to go and have a look at what they say. 2 years ago, with the Russian armed forces facing catastrophic manpower shortages on the front of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin announced partial mobilization. Armed forces of Ukraine had executed a lightning counteroffensive that liberated large swaths of the Kharkiv region. I believe this was the opportunity for Ukraine. That time, end of 22, that was the opportunity. Also, though, that was when the 10-point peace plan was written, which was a very different time on the front, and I don't believe we're going to see another time like that, at least for Ukraine. Anyway, Russia managed to stabilise the situation in 23. Rumours of new wave of mobilisation have never ceased to circulate. Every couple of weeks, I see new channels posting up new massive conscription, blah, blah, blah. That's also not a great thing if the country you're fighting can conscript hundreds of thousands of soldiers while you have manpower. That's also not a good thing. I see, like, I get it has push on society and economy, but it's also not great for the front line either. They were talking about Russia has still not been able to dislodge Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region. And in my opinion, this is strategically the correct decision for Russia to do. The amount of troops they'd have to deploy to dislodge them in there, regardless of your manpower, I actually think that's the correct strategic decision to hold there, because then Ukraine has to have a few thousand soldiers and whatever else systems in here defending that they can't use somewhere else. The reason I believe this is also then not only correct, but is assumed to be correct by Ukrainian commanders, is that Ukraine wanted Russia to counter in here. They laid bait for a Russian counter. And with Russia out taking the bait, then I can assume that, okay, if they didn't take the bait, then it was strategically the right move, because Ukraine wanted them to make the strategic wrong move by taking the bait and having a push somewhere else. Does that then make sense? So I believe, yeah, they haven't been able to dislodge them because I don't believe they want to dislodge them. I think it's actually helping Russia at this point. I know correlation doesn't mean causation, but we can see the East falling even faster, right on par with when the Northern Offensive happened. Mobilisation would come at a huge political cost, absolutely, as those Russians who might have been willing to take up arms have largely already enlisted, and drafting men who are reluctant to fight presents a series of added difficulties. Its current rate of personnel replacement allows the Russian armed forces to compensate for its losses. However, the issue remains that it's resolved by raising bonus payments. So they're putting more money to try and get guys to sign up of course, more expensive, but currently it is meeting that rate. Of course, we haven't seen further mobilisation, but this situation is unlikely to become threatening. The only scenario that would necessitate mobilisation is the encirclement or destruction of a large group of troops. But the situation on the ground makes such a development almost impossible, of course, because it is an attritional grinding war forward. The ability to have like this massive encirclement or destruction, I think it's very unlikely to see in the way this protracted grinding war has come forward. It's not impossible, but I think it's less likely now. Again, the opportunity, I believe, was at the end of 2022. This military analysis believes that if mobilisation did take place, it would not help the Russian armed forces achieve its tasks in the short term. So I don't think that even a second wave mobilisation can guarantee Russia's capture of Donetsk region. Putting together a large infantry force is not enough. And it won't be that large in any case, maybe 300,000 troops, which is fewer than that at last year's number of contract recruits. Even if we are to believe the available reports, they may have been able to recapture Kursk region, but the Russian forces could manage it even without mobilisation if they allocate more troops and resources. So they could take that if they want the allocation, which is what, of course, Ukraine wanted. The fate of the soldiers mobilised in the previous wave remains unclear. Of course, we know there's been large losses too. This Telegram channel complains about the lack of rotation and keeps count of the fellow soldiers who have sustained wounds and suffered illnesses over 2 years of frontline duty. The soldiers are gaining experience, but the overall impact is negative, of course. At least that is what he is saying. Remember, training mobilisation takes a long time to gain experience and training as well. CIT, which we spoke of, believes this problem has not yet become critical for the Russian army as far as fatigue, fatalism within the forces, saying the mobilised have become somewhat less involved in assault actions, giving way to mostly fresh volunteer contract servicemen. Therefore, the troops' fatigue has a small impact. In addition, strict, or should we rather say brutal discipline in all pits, basements and so on, so far allows commanders to maintain order among troops. Known cases of desertion by entire units can literally be counted on one's fingers. And this is one of the hallmarks of a tired army. So the mobilised have become more in holding areas, safer secondary fronts, while then the contract soldiers, of course, the more motivated, are taking areas and mobilised, then holding that areas, of course, to gain experience and move forward. We've spoken about this is what needs to happen in attritional warfare. You don't feed new guys into the very, very front line because you just lose experience quickly. The Russian army has already shifted to the tactic of infantry assaults, where soldiers attack in small groups without vehicles. Due to Russia's numerical advantage, the tactic is working. Its active use will probably continue. Again, I don't know in this war any other way around that. I know everyone talks about, these sweet doctrine and manoeuvre and this and that. Against defensive positions that have been sitting there for a couple of years, I just don't know. You can't outmaneuver that at this point in time without massive amounts of air superiority. And even if that is possible as well. So the way we're seeing the war fought, I actually don't know if there's another way to the brutality of this. Despite the obstacles, experts nevertheless agree that Russia could mobilise another 300,000 people if necessary. If mobilisation becomes necessary in terms of political stability, another 300,000 is unlikely to seriously undermine the regime. So saying that they could do another 300,000 and it won't be a complete undermining, which is what, of course, these other bloggers are talking about when they go, Russia's going to mobilise more. They're expecting then an internal collapse, which the mobilisation hasn't come, nor has the internal collapse some have predicted now over a year ago. The economic aspect of mobilisation cannot be overlooked either, especially once tens of thousands of men who will flee the country once mobilisation is announced are factored in. Let's say they can mobilise 200,000 to 300,000 men. If they are skilled workers, it would deal a heavy blow to key industries, slowing down their growth and causing a decline in GDP. But this economist here says if they grab whoever they can get, do they have anyone left after those 2.5 years? Meat grinder assaults and previous mobilisation considerably depleted the number of unskilled workers. Again, this is one of your problems, is you're getting young guys. These young guys also work in factories. They work in these jobs and farming, in industry that absolutely the GDP is critical for. So you're drawing that down, your ability to fund the war, while increasing your ability to fight the war. This is another reason why authorities prefer to recruit contract servicemen, as the value of the average volunteer for the economy is lower. So if you are signing up to fight, well, it doesn't have as much as an effect. Companies are hiring people on the street to use them to meet their military recruitment targets while preserving their staff. So again, some of these companies have targets of people they need to send away to the military, that we're getting this new guy off the street. Okay, you go. So you're not impacting your existing experienced staff. As harsh as it may sound, an unemployed man with a bank loan and the last combine harvester operating in the village have a different value for businesses and therefore for the economy. It's true. Savage as it is, one guy is more important than another for actually the economy. He doesn't matter any less. I'm not saying that, but for the economy, very different. Since mobilisation is a lottery, the probability of losing a skilled professional is much higher. Additionally, replacing 30,000 employees a month is not quite the same as 300,000. So we're seeing that volunteer rate at that around 30,000. But if it was 300,000, it would have an effect. But they're saying that it wouldn't, of course, that Russia could actually be able to do that also, which wouldn't then surprise me too. So if we see more mobilisation occur, I can see it being a big impact on Russia economically, stability, this and that. I don't believe it's enough to collapse Russia. At the same time, I know this is being celebrated by the sort of NAFO pro-Ukrainian accounts, and I'm like, I wouldn't be celebrating another 300,000 men entering the battlefield, of which is currently being lost by Ukraine. I don't see how that the positives and negatives of this, of economic hit, impact to civilians and parents and families, and unrest potentially in Russia versus 300,000 dudes entering the battlefield, I think does not weigh in Ukraine's favour, especially when Ukraine is desperate to mobilise and needs more men, which is being, for some reason, not done at this point. We know the reason. I'm going to talk about that in another video. Legends, I struggled to get through this, but have a great day. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.